In this podcast, I spoke to Dawn Garland. Dawn is a transpersonal integrative psychologist. It was quite refreshing to talk to somebody who had an awakening experience a number of years ago now, who has since gone down the field of psychology, because very often that gets dismissed when there is a recognition that there is nothing to be done or anything to be healed per se. So it was quite refreshing to talk to somebody. We spoke about freedom, boundless energy, boundless love, non-locality, and obviously various different fields of psychology as well. So let me know what you think of the podcast. Enjoy talking to Dawn. See you soon. So Dawn, thank you for being here. The reason I wanted to speak with you, well, first of all, Richard Sylvester told me to get in touch with you. So a mutual friend, I think. So thank you for coming on. The reason I wanted to speak with you, Dawn, is because a lot of this type of communication, when I spoke to people like Richard, I've also spoke to Jim Newman, Kenneth Madden, people like that, when I mention things like psychology and psychotherapy and things like this, very often that is overlooked. And I completely understand why it's overlooked in this context. But I think that doesn't help a lot of people, which is the sort of paradox of the whole thing. So could you sort of expand on why you do talk about that and why you think it's important?
Okay, on one level, so there's nothing happening and there's no one and all this. And if you're in a no mind state, I mean, no thought, I mean, you're not really going to access psychology, are you? You're not really going to be reflecting on, on stuff. But for most people, that is not actually the case. So there's the awakening, and and things are easier. But and because of this communication being the way it is, there's almost like a taboo around the psychological stuff. But problems do come up, and I've come across that working with people one-to-one and whatever, because it doesn't, life goes on, right? Life goes on, and relationships happen, friendships happen, shit hits the fan. And actually, some of us can get really stuck, and suffering can arise. And maybe there's no one to turn to in that. There's a kind of shame around it. I'm awake, therefore everything should be easier. And certainly it makes things easier because you're not in that, you're not in suffering in the same way. It doesn't have such a grip on you. But when life is overwhelming, we all know what that is. We've all got, there's, if your relationship's coming apart, or you've lost your home or your job's, all that stuff comes up. And so we talk about it, but it's taboo. I think there's a taboo around it. And so what I've experienced myself and what I've experienced with other people, repression can continue. Like old patterns, I think a lot of people admit that it takes a while for things to unwind pattern wise. For me, the heart being open, that releases so much, and it enables life to be much more easeful, and connection with people is just so much more natural, and it's great. But you can still be seeing life through a distorted lens, so you can still end up repeating history in a sense, in the same kind of relationships that maybe were toxic before, and maybe not having the impetus to change your life because it's good enough. So there's this, you can almost opt out, because you can kind of just, for a lot of us, I think thought is not compulsive. We can just drop it. But the body kind of knows, so the body, you can't argue with the body. It doesn't like it when you're kind of pushing stuff down. And so some of us do that, and we carry on and we don't change anything. So yeah. And when people do realize that there is this distortion, whatever, they change so quickly. That's what is really fascinating. There is this they move much more quickly, I think, than before awakening. So it's just amazing. But we all need support at times. I think that's just it. There's just this normal life going on, and as well, it's a different relationship with that life, and it's not your life, obviously, but it's still throws up from some pretty scary stuff. So
Yeah, I guess if I were to think about what, let's use Jim Newman, because he's pretty radical in how he talks. I'd think he'd say something like, it's just happening, and there is no one it's happening to, therefore it's sort of irrelevant. How do you like integrate that?
Well, I mean, that on one level that's true, because there isn't, and there never was, and there never will be, but there is this appearance, and it doesn't have the same reality to it, but it's the only reality we have access to. It's like nothing has changed. It's just the relationship is different. So there's no ownership here. There's no sense of location here, but still, Dawn has relationships. Dawn has to make her way through life. It's so, and there is an unconscious, because we do reflect when the shit hits the fan, awake or not awake, you will reflect upon your life and look at it. And if you get insights, you will change the trajectory of your life. If you don't get them, you won't. But so it's just, that's on one level, yeah. On the basic level, yeah, this is a story. This is just an appearance. This is nothing happening and everything, nothing and everything happening. But yeah, when the shit hits the fan, that doesn't help anyone.
No, it definitely doesn't. No. For context, Dawn, can you like share a little bit about what happened to you?
So there was obviously some repression there. So from my own way of relating, and so I didn't realize I was a kind of doormat. And so after my awakening, life went on, but for me, it was very, very empty, as in there was no mind. Most of the time, no thought whatsoever. It was very blissful. So no matter what life threw at me, there was just, there was like, there's seemed no point to look at anything, because there was just this radical acceptance of everything. And then 3.5 years ago, I started getting a lot of Kundalini stuff, which I'd had before, but so visions. I had an experience of going to hell, which kind of revealed my own repression to me. So I changed radically after that, psychologically speaking. I had a much more of a psychological clarity than I'd ever had before, which just seems to be increasing. And then I realized, actually, this is happening with other people. So in one-to-ones, I've recognized that there's other people who are awake who've actually gone through the same process, but they don't know what to turn, or they maybe don't even know that they're awake, and then they realize they are. Like, I think if you're a kind of people pleaser doormat, they're much less likely to even own this, or to even declare, like, awakening has happened, or so they kind of pretend, they go undercover with this. You're awake, I'm not, or and they keep a lot of stuff to themselves. So I realized that, yeah, if you've got a narcissistic character, then that's likely to continue, because that's trauma based, and trauma's in the body. Like, you can't argue with that. Some of it's easier to shift if it's not like narcissistic wounding. That's really, some would say, actually everybody pretty much says you can't change that. So you'll have a fight response to trauma. So it's not about non-reacting, that some people present non-duality as. After awakening, someone gives you shit, you're just like, you respond, not react. But actually, if you've got a narcissistic character, you're going to react, and even if you're a doormat, maybe you'll react, maybe you won't, but more likely that you won't, because you're afraid of anger, you're afraid of confrontation, and you want a peaceful life. You'll do anything for a peaceful life, even if it means being very small and very inauthentic and staying put. So, yeah.
In the psychological field, what I've sort of found here is that, I've read, I couldn't even count how many books I've read in the field of psychology and the different modalities and that. I genuinely wouldn't know.
Right.
But it just seems you never get anywhere. It just seems it's a constant reinforcement of things. Like, I've read, this isn't to like tell everybody what I've read, but you know, Freud, Jung, Adler, all these people, like the modern,
Right.
the fathers of psychology, let's just call it that.
Uh-huh.
And it seems like, okay, dream work, for example.
Right.
You start doing that. How to use dreams in the psychological healing process, mythology, things like that. And I'm thinking, well, where am I going? Well, is there an end point here? Or is it a purification process? Or I just think it's a labyrinth. That's how I've got to the point now where I can't read that stuff anymore because it doesn't seem to be doing anything. It's like a waste of time.
Yeah, fair enough. But for some people, there's an insight there that can be, you know, if it may take just one insight. And beyond all that theory, to be honest, I mean, that's theoretical.
Of course, yeah.
Shite in a way, like, and sometimes it's so abstract. It's like, actually, it's much more simple than that. Like, we need to be seen. We need to be heard, whether awake or not. We need someone who can honestly respond to what we're saying, because some of us don't even know what it's like to, like, someone who models a good relationship or a good enough relationship. Some of us never had that. So all we know is something not very healthy, and we repeat that. So in a sense, it's the relationship maybe with the therapist or with a confidant. If you've got a confidant, you know, who's really, you know, honest and sees you and listens to you and reflects back, I mean, that's gold dust. So maybe looking through all this theory stuff, it's not about that. Like, I don't know, good relationships, if you've got all that, if you've got good supports in your life, but it depends. Maybe you don't need it. And some people get bored shitless with this because nothing changes. And if you've got deep, you know, trauma and stuff, maybe for you, it's like, put it aside and just move on. I don't know. I wouldn't, it's, you know, for me, it's not like you should do this. It's just, I know what's been good for me. And like, I've got good friends. And there's a lot of healing through just sharing and listening and share, you know. So.
Yeah. No, definitely relationships and definitely play a huge role in my developmental process. I don't like to call it awakening process because I sort of perceive there to be levels of it. Right. And I know that's a bit of a taboo as well. That's levels, and it's either black or white, and there's levels. I mean, I sort of am of the belief that it's not linear. It's like a non-linear developmental process in some way. I don't really know how to word it. And these psychotherapeutic models and processes can assist in that. But sometimes I just feel like they do more harm than good. And I do agree with you that generally speaking, the simpler something is, tends to be have more utility than the more complex and theoretical stuff, most definitely. Do you consider yourself a psychotherapist? Is that like? I am. Yeah, I am a qualified
psychotherapist, transpersonal integrative psychotherapist. But like all you need to know in terms of, I mean, if you're in touch with all of your emotions, if you're not pushing stuff down, if you're not repressing stuff, I mean, that's all your information is available to you. You don't really need anything but to start to trust that and to put anger where it belongs, to really not shut, you know, like you get a lot of people just excuse, like, you know, idealize their childhoods, you know, they're so scared of like being radically honest. And it's really quite simple. You don't need to make it complex. You know, it's there at your disposal. And we all, if you want to just grow, it's getting more in touch with your gut instincts anyway. Just like, I mean, it's so powerful, that stuff. It really is. The information you start to access, I mean, that's freedom as well. Like, it's another kind of freedom.
Could you expand on that a bit?
Well, because you don't need recourse to books. All you need is recourse to, so you know what you're feeling, and the feelings are, you know, that informs the thinking as well. So you go to feeling first, and you know, if you feel shame, maybe you realize that actually somebody has shamed you. It's not it's a toxic, you know, it's not a healthy shame. Healthy shame, maybe you've been a bit of an ass, you know, like, but But if you feel that, maybe it should be blame rather than shame, but you're taking on something. So it's just being able to know what you're feeling and then look at why you're feeling it. Is that it's just the information, because you can't argue with the emotions. When they're there, and it's those are your messengers, and thought should inform that. But if you're an awakened head, you're lost, because you don't have access to that. So an awakened narcissist wouldn't be in touch with all that wealth of feeling. So, but they don't care. They don't mind. They've got power. So
you mentioned that 2012, I think it was, there was like a state of no-mindedness, no thought. Would the emotions there, do they arise in that state? Or would you consider mind and emotions as two separate things?
In that sense, so after the kind of Big Bang, the seeing of nothing and everything in 2012, there was more just bliss. I wouldn't say even emotion in a sense. It was just bliss and love. Because when there's no mind, there tends to be, well, certainly here, there doesn't tend to be any emotion here. Like, it's just a feeling of fullness, of goodness, of love and connection. It's so I'm not in and out of emotional states. They come, they go. They tend to be quite fleeting, but initially it was just that. So they wouldn't really have arisen, apart from maybe joy, perhaps, but none of the, I don't know, no negative emotions. It was just pretty simple and pretty constant. So, and it went on like that for, I don't know, maybe 3 years. Like, I don't know, and nothing going on most of the time. So,
were you working in that time?
No.
So you were just completely, blissed out?
I was just blissed out, yeah. I was just sitting in benches and walking and staring at the wall, staring out the window, that kind of thing. So yeah, it was just.
So there's a fair few years there, really. So since then, let's say 2012, a few years. You mentioned Kundalini. Was that like what you perceive to be like a next stage, or was it just I don't know, a happening? I don't know how to word it.
Well, sometimes it's got, in a sense, it's got no. It's irrelevant. It's not part of the seeing. It can happen before awakening. It can happen after. Okay. And it may never happen at all, but often around the awakening period, you might experience, a lot of people experience the more kind of cliched Kundalini experience of like a rush of energy up the back, up to the crown chakra light, all that sort of thing. So I had stuff around that. And then, so there's two different processes: an energetic awakening, Kundalini awakening, which continues for life, which is what I had around awakening. And then I had a light kind of based one that started 3.5 years ago, which is inner light is a constant. So that never goes. And sometimes that gets very, very bright. And when it gets very bright, I tend to get other experiences in that. So visions, inner sounds, outer sounds, other realities, that kind of thing. So, but they can give, sorry.
No, please.
Well, they can give you insights into the non-dual as well. Like just before awakening, there was a seeing in a tube train of everybody being awake, and that was visual. So kind of knowing what that was without knowing what that was, and then seeing the veils. So like those kind of illuminations, I think they're called, can give you a taste of this. It's not the whole thing, but so you get a sense of that, seeing the aliveness, there's stuff like that, seeing the innocence, and then the Big Bang, of course, is the seeing and nothing and everything, where the self is seen through, and it's just the end of. No.
Yeah. Was there a sense of needing to do anything at that point?
Needing what? At which point? What after?
Probably call it the bang.
Call it the what? Sorry.
The bang, the awakening. The awakening that you had was because the doership is spoken about as falling away, the doer has fallen away. Was there a sense that he needed to do anything?
Well, there was no, it was just seen that there was no one, that it was all arising spontaneously. And, you know, it was just beyond that. The location had gone, I mean, that already gone in the awakening to emptiness anyway. There was no one here. It was, you know, it was physical, it was seen, it was, you know, it's so obvious. In the Big Bang moment, it felt initially like a loss, like a horrific, and then it, like, but it's not even in time, this, and then it wasn't, it was just the love. So it's not a loss, it's, you know, it was, you know, there's no word to describe that. It's just absolutely amazing. And so no, it's beyond doing or fulfillment, or it's beyond all these concepts. It's beyond words, it's beyond it's just coming home. It's just peace beyond understanding, and it's just love. And so it kind of took me away from the situation I was in, which was a restaurant, you know, like it was very difficult to carry on a conversation after that. But yeah.
What were you doing for a living before that?
Oh, just various, you know,
just
bits, pieces, like
okay,
shit jobs.
Was there like a spiritual seeking prior to that, or was it purely spontaneous?
There wasn't really, not really. I mean, I had something like a glimpse like 20 years before this, but I didn't know that was the case. And there was a kind of seeking after that. Like I in that glimpse, I knew that there was something else going on, but I never heard anybody talk about that. And I had come across the words non-duality. No doubt I'd come across those in some of the books I'd read, but it was just, I just ignored it. So there was a sense, but seeking, you know, barking up the wrong tree. And then suddenly I came across like Eckhart Tolle and a few others, maybe a couple of months beforehand. And I had come across Krishnamurti a few years ago, but I'd read kind of one or two books and left it at that, you know. I kind of only took it at the level where he talked about, you know, how the mind is during meditation. You know, it wasn't specifically non-dual as well. Yeah, it seemed to be him talking about no mind state, which I guess he was kind of in, but he was also, obviously he was awake, but he went into the meditative state and he was like looking at the mind. There's anger, there's blah, 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 blah. I got a lot out of that, but it wasn't anything to do with awakening. That's what I got. So. Yeah.
Are you aware of UG Krishnamurti?
Yeah. I very much
him. I very much like UG Krishnamurti. His personality is like when I talk to people, that is sort of a little bit like how I communicate. He's very not abrupt, maybe that's the right word and wrong word, and I think maybe he's doing it to teach people perhaps, but that is, I resonate with his message.
No, there's a freedom in that. He seemed fun. Like he would have this appearance of very angry, but you could just see that seemed like skin deep. Like it wasn't there 1 second later. He'd just be laughing, and he seemed like I don't know. Maybe he was tricky as hell. Who knows? But he seemed like really fun to engage with, and so like it was kind of a relief to come across him because he was a kind of one-off, which is kind of what you want. But it's very lovely. Maybe not close up, but I have no idea. Like, but he was an unusual character, an unusual backdrop as well. His story is very weird, like very intriguing.
I think he was this is to go somewhere. The Theosophical Society, I think he was like his grandfather was a leader of the Theosophical Society or something, along with Jiddu Krishnamurti. What I'm very wary that a lot of what's been said in this area could be classified as like New Ageism. And although within me, I genuinely don't think that is the case. by any stretch of the imagination. I do sort of see people who talk about this type of stuff who do say, you know, like there's some grand mass awakening going on. And that sort of repels me quite a lot. I think that's just complete and utter nonsense. Do you see the link between the two, or do you think that there isn't one?
Well, the sort of thing of the mass awakening is a different thing, but it often seems to be attached to some sort of moral cleansing thing, this sort of moral hygiene, that we're all going to turn into this, you know, benign society. And, you know, yeah, it's a bit icky, but it does seem like, I mean, it's so common. Glimpses are just common. I find it almost unusual to meet someone who doesn't kind of have some understanding of this or had some experience. Like everywhere I go, like I go for an appointment and, you know, whatever it is, like somebody's telling me about their out-of-body experiences. I know that's not non-duality, but still, you know, like people have all this stuff going on all the time, but, you know, so I don't know. But the New Age thing, I'm not sure what you're getting at really with the New Age.
Like, you know, like numerology and all this stuff. And I just think, what good is it doing anyone? When people talk about that, and then they'll listen to someone like yourself talk about non-duality, and then they'll make a link that you're talking about similar things.
Right.
And I don't think that that's the case, but I think that this message and the people talking about this type of stuff gets lumped in with it. And I think it's very important, in my opinion, to sort of separate the two. That actually what you're talking about was spoken about in ancient Egypt. Do you know what I'm saying?
Well, yeah, because this is beyond all that. This isn't not an experience. It's got nothing in common with any of that stuff, and it's just it's an absolute dropping away of any of that stuff. Not to say you can't get interested in things afterwards, but yeah, it's irrelevant. It's on its own. The non-dual seeing is kind of what people are after. It's the end to the self. I mean, there's nothing that compares to that. There's nothing that's it really. After that, you're interested in something, so what? But this is as close to the end of suffering you're going to get. This is the end of the self. It's a transformation too, and nothing cuts it. Nothing. Everything else is an experience in time. This is the end of all that. So it's a different kind of level altogether. They can't be compared, and they can't really be associated. There isn't, okay, you can have energetic experiences, but so what? It's not on the same level. No way. It's not going to put an end to the identification. It's just not, you know, it's just interesting. It's just interesting shit. You know, and fun. But numerology, wouldn't be my cup of tea. But
listen, that was just an example. I'm not knocking the numerologists or anything. That was just an example that comes to the top of my head. And that type of information, well, not even information, it's just stuff. Sort of, I don't know. I'm very conscious that what you're talking about is completely different to all of that.
Yeah.
Stuff.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's the end of stuff. It's the end of things happening. It's the end of cause and effect, isn't it? It's just.
Let's talk a little bit about all that, the non-duality thing then. You mentioned there that, you know, this is what people are seeking. Do you consider everybody on the face of the planet is seeking this by their actions in daily life? Is that what they're all trying to get back to?
Well, how can I say that? I can't know that. You know, for a lot of people, there's a sense of unease and a sense of trying to externally to get fulfillment from the external world, for sure. And we say that, well, that's it. They want to return to wholeness. So, I mean, maybe it is, but we don't know that when, you know, and how can you know what this is anyway? Because when it happens, it's obviously, you know, it's beyond the mind, right? So they can't know what they're after anyway. So it's an idea. Basically, it's an idea. Okay, maybe because we were born into this, we were born whole. So whether there's something in that, like a sense of that, and some people never close down entirely as well. So I don't know, but of course, I mean, what drives you to try and to seek this is, for most people, it's just the end of suffering, isn't it? It's just as simple as that, or just the end of seeking, or the end of, because it seems it's frustrating as hell when you get into this, isn't it? And it seems like some smug bastard at the front of her fighting this shit, and it doesn't make any sense. What the hell is nothing and everything? And you kind of, all you've got is the mind, really. So I don't know, but yeah, I mean, I don't know that I was seeking. I just assumed, I was very nihilistic. It was just, this is unbearable, this is unlivable, and there's no way around that. Like, and so that's how I saw it. So I didn't, you know.
But that's how you saw life prior to 2012.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Unlivable. I just saw, I wished I hadn't been born. It was just too, it's just like suffering for no reason, and you're going to die, and why? But I didn't see there was any solution to that. Not that there is a solution to that, but that falls away. It's like, that's the amazing thing. It's like, it's not, because I was, you know, I didn't expect that there was a fix for that. I was trying to accept that, but of course you can't accept that. You can't accept that life is utterly suffering, death, and futile. So you end up in a war with yourself, which I was totally at war with myself. So yeah, total mess.
Yeah.
And then
go on, please.
Just then suddenly not, you know.
Was that an instant thing?
Oh, it was stepping into sanity. It was, and without looking back, without reflection, it was just all gone. That was gone. And not even a sense of, oh, phew, that was all gone. None of that. Like, it was so, this is it. So this is it now. And it always was this, that there wasn't any possibility of thinking, oh my God, a few minutes ago, life was fucking crazy and shit. That was gone. It was just another life, and that wasn't mine. And yeah, it's strange that, well, and it's not, because it's so natural to, yeah. But what a blessing. Like, but you don't even think in terms of that, like, you know, because that's another idea. It's incredible, really.
You know, when you work one-on-one with clients, is there people who struggle with their careers when they've had this type of thing happen to them? Let me give you context for the question. I'll use myself as an example. I've run a couple of real estate companies,
right?
And I'm fully aware of the meaninglessness of it. Completely meaningless to me. And like, sometimes I'm sitting in a meeting and I just want to just go, this is such a waste of time. Like, I might as well just sell up everything and just do X, Y, Z.
Right. So
for the context of the question, would you have people like myself who sometimes struggle with how life is presenting itself in the term of career? It could be relationships or whatever else, but in terms of career specifically.
Oh yeah, people get overwhelmed. People want to change things. People, yeah, I mean, anything can happen as before. You know, it doesn't, because you may be less suited to, I mean, that's the thing. You wake up in the same circumstances, don't you? But they may not fit you anymore, and they may for a while, because you don't give a shit because you're so blissed out. But after a time, it may not. It may be that you're doing something that feels really meaningless in that sense, and that's okay, because you're so in the moment and you don't really care. But for some people, it's like, maybe they had stuff when they were younger that they really wanted to do, and now they want to actualize that because they realize, oh my God, you know, my life I've been wanting to do this, and the barriers of blocks, that perceived blocks, are just gone. So maybe they need a little bit of encouragement, because no one ever encouraged them. There's so many people like that. They've never actually had anyone say, wow, that sounds like a good idea, or even take them seriously. So they've learned not to take themselves seriously. So after awakening, there may be a period of time where none of this is questioned, and then, you know, maybe I can do this, or maybe I can change my life. It's like a revelation, and that's really exciting. So yeah, it's the same as before, but yeah, I think yeah, I think in the first few years, it's almost like just, for most people, it's probably just being just like, wow, just being with the trees and the wall and I don't know, and being with people and just that sort of presence. And it's just so juicy. But, life goes on. So.
Yeah. What led you to sort of teaching this to other people? You do sessions in London, do you, in front of people? I mean, what led you to that?
Talking about it, I realized I wasn't talking about it, and it seemed like such a challenge to me because I'm so shy. I'm like a really shy character, and that's like, almost impossible. So I don't know. I just got an urge to. Why the hell not? And and then the Emerson thing came up, and so yeah, I just can I, and also because before the kind of Kundalini, the last Kundalini thing, I didn't have anything really to say about non-duality. Like, I didn't really want to just be like, this is it. Or so suddenly there was like, I just find it interesting my own path because there was a change in how I perceived reality, not ultimate reality, but the psychological change. And I realized it's not just me that's going through that. So I thought, there's something there, like it might be useful as well. It might not to most people, but not saying it was altruistic, but but I wanted to explore it, and there's a good way of exploring this stuff is talking about it, because it gives you an excuse to kind of look into it, to read about shit, and
true.
You focus differently when you're talking. So it's like, what else is going on? So I'm always questioning things. I'm always looking at my own experience, other people's experiences, and and yeah, so it's exciting. I find it exciting most of the time, and kind of like, why the hell am I doing that some of the time? Because it's but
what do you think the role of psychedelics play in the psychological landscape?
Well, I'm not an expert. I have taken them, and I mean, they can give people have glimpses, don't they? And there can be changes brought about. I know it's good in healing depression and all these things. I don't know about abiding states from this. It doesn't seem to engender that, but it certainly seems to give rise to glimpses. So it probably does create change, but I'm not, like I say, I'm not an expert, but I think it's exciting. We're living in exciting times because this stuff is becoming more mainstream. People are, experimenting with mushrooms. They're being treated with ketamine for depression and stuff. So it's becoming less taboo now. And no, it's exciting. There's definitely insights to be gained there. And as long as you're not so traumatized and you're like, can bring up stuff as well. But
I've been in ayahuasca ceremonies and bless them, a couple of people there were so badly traumatized it probably wasn't a good idea for them to be taking ayahuasca, to be fair.
You do get that, and you don't know who's holding it, and maybe they don't even know how to deal with that material as well. So but I think you need to be in good hands if you've got that. But it is, I mean, everybody's got to decide for themselves, or maybe seek a second opinion if you're really doubtful. But some people do have a rough ride. I know that, but I don't know a hell of a lot about it. But going off to Peru or something is that's a big one. And you might have a 21-year-old facilitator or something, jack shit about trauma, and I don't know. I know Gabor Mate's run a few of those, hasn't he? And suppose if you're with someone who gets it like that, we'd be in good hands. But
let's talk about like some of the topics that some of the teachers talk about here, the non-duality teachers. Let's talk about like for example, free will. I've it down here. What's your take on that?
It's such a boring subject.
It is, but it is very boring, but it's so like, for the person who isn't where you're at, the free will determinism is such a philosophical concept that they battle with. I can speak from experience here, that it's worthwhile talking to people who have sort of seen through it.
but it never was there, you know, and you can understand that philosophically anyway. So it never was there. And we go on through life like as if it is, in a way, like making our choices, and you know, and it doesn't detract anything. And ultimately we don't know what this is anyway. So it's not say that you can't change your life. I mean, people think that it kind of means what it doesn't mean. I mean, this the story of time arises. You can still change. There's no one who can make change happen, but you know, you can do certain things that are going to make life maybe easier and change certain things. I don't know. It's not. I suppose it's easy to say from here, but so what? Like it's always been. This has always been the case, and it doesn't really change. Well,
what's always been the case?
Well, life is. There's never been free will. I mean, and so the only difference here now is life is experienced differently. It's seen that, it's known that, and it's also known there's nothing, there's everything. It's not a loss of anything in one sense. Well, it is a loss of ownership, but it's not. Language just doesn't cut this, does it? I mean, it's love. It's love. It's not. There's nothing in this. Once you start talking philosophically, it gets dry as fuck, as far as I'm concerned. Like it really does. And why would you want that? I'm sure if I'd come across a lot of people speaking about free will, and I don't run a million miles from it because it sounds so dry and so. Well, why would you want that? I mean, nobody would want that, you know. So, but yeah, the love stuff and the others, you know. I mean, what it's about ultimately is different, isn't it? Because that is just rest, and it's just being where you are. And I think people get a sense of that. They can at least, they don't know what that's like as an ongoing thing, but sometimes you get a sense of that just being where you are. Maybe it's in an intimate situation, maybe it's when you're on holiday, or you know, we all get a kind of slight flavor of that, but it's not maybe seen in the same way as stillness is everywhere. It's seen, it's visual, it's you know, this is proper coming home. It's, you know, and it doesn't waver. So I'm much more into that aspect of things. But
you've mentioned the word love quite a lot. Can you sort of help me understand what you mean when you say that word?
Well, it's just boundless. So it's not conditional on. It's not in love. There's an loveness that's experienced with everything, and everything is love. So there's an intimacy with all of life, and it's also seen. Everything is that, and there is no other. And that is the peace. That's the coming home, and that's. I mean. So when you kind of are with, I don't know, when you're sat in nature, it's like merging with that. It's just, there's no division, you know, part of the collapse of inner and outer. It's just this, it's not even a radical intimacy with, it's just intimacy, and it's beyond all our categories, beyond the mind, it's beyond any understanding. But it's also, the beauty of that is absorbing as well. So looking at something, and the beauty and the perfection in that as well. That's the stuff that really blows you away, I think, at first. If you have that and seeing that, like stillness in everything, and stillness in noise, and, you know, and silence, and yeah, it's just breathtaking, and it's healing as well. It depends on the wounds, but your heart is open then, and so for me that was such a relief, because I found it really hard to get close to someone in a relationship, at least for a period of time. I wasn't always like that, but. So that was gone. It was like, wow, I'm kind of, you know, like, wow, I don't have intimacy issues anymore. Like, that was amazing. You know.
See, that brings up the psychology question again, because you didn't do anything there.
No.
That was just, I don't know, an unfoldment or whatever. So if you go back to what we spoke about at the beginning, but where is the value there? In the psychological field? I mean, even UG Krishnamurti, I think he said something like, at the time, obviously it's different now to what it was then, but the field of psychology is, he basically said it's one of the biggest frauds ever, which is very much in his character to say something like that, so abrupt. But if you're saying there that you weren't doing psychology or whatever, and from one day you were this way and one day you were the next, doesn't that render it sort of obsolete?
So in my case, I had problems with intimacy. Like I couldn't get close to someone for, it was like a period of 10 years. Now, if you always, before that I was able to, so I was hurt. If you were like that throughout your whole life, there's a chance that this awakening wouldn't change that. So you might have to either come to terms with it, or, so it's not like it blows everything away. And if you say that psychotherapy or, you know, psychology is obsolete, well, you might as well say good relationships are obsolete, good friendships are, because it's the same thing. All it is a model of good relating and internalizing that, except it's more, you know, if it's therapy, it's more attention on you. It's more of a one-way thing. But who's going to throw love out the window? Who's going to throw a good friendship out the window? I mean, I treasure that now. I mean, more in the last 3.5 years. I mean, I really treasure that, like being around people who are emotionally open, who reflect back to me, who tell me the truth about how they feel. When I piss them off, they tell me I'm pissing them off. You know, like that is just fucking amazing. And I love it. And that's health. And if you don't have that, I think, you know, there's a lot in yourself that you don't realize, like, and a lot of potential that may never come to light because no one is seeing it. No one is, you know, like, so maybe some people don't need that, but I think most of us do deep down. We kind of want to be with someone, if you're awake or not awake, but you want to be with someone who reflects that openness. So that, you know, I don't know, like in a good relationship, we tend to support each other moving forward, don't we? You know, in a bad relationship, you might just get a lack of response when you say you want to do something. You might be invalidated. You might be shamed, actually shamed without even realizing you're being shamed. So you just stay put. You know, because the wounds are really, it doesn't remove everything. It depends what was there before. And like I say, if you've got something really early on, like from childhood, it's more, it can be harder to fix, maybe, depending what it is. For me, it only emerged, you know, in a certain, so it was adult. I was an adult when I got hurt and wounded and wasn't able to, and I just thought I could never have a really close relationship ever again. And that went. So that went, my heart was open. It was gone, you know. Yeah, I didn't need anything for that. Just, wow, there it is, it's gone. So yeah.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. When you mentioned good relationships, there is essentially what psychology is. I completely agree with that. Boundlessness, and I consider that like in a different word, non-locality, like non-linear. That's how my mind sort of contextualizes it. I've only experienced that very fleetingly, and it sort of comes in and out, that non-feeling, if you like, of non-locality. It was, it's very difficult because I trap myself in words, but I suppose I'm asking, is there something that can be done in order to make that a permanent state?
No, there isn't. I mean, there, you know, that happens or it doesn't happen. It seems not, you know, I mean, it's already the case anyway. So yeah, everything's already realized.
And that makes me rip my hair out because I get the words and I intellectually understand what's being said, but the living reality, again, words trip me up. The living reality of it is that isn't the case. Yeah,
no, it's very frustrating. It is very frustrating. And it doesn't mean to say you can accept that either, because the seeking energy annihilates any kind of acceptance anyway. It's just, you can't argue with that. You're going to be at the next meeting. You're going to read those books. You know, it's difficult. But like I said, glimpses, it seems more easy. And I know that the empirical evidence suggests, there's not a lot that I've read, but just that grief and extreme suffering tend to bring about the end of, not tend to, but a lot of people have woken up. That's their kind of backstory, if you like, but I don't know how common that is either. Like, and that was a small sample, like, of Steve Taylor's work, but so I don't know. We don't know a lot about this stuff, I don't think. Maybe I'm not reading the right material, I don't know, but you know, and there is energetic, you know, there is a sort of energy in the rooms. Those the meeting room. So there definitely is something going on. Like people do seem to, the self drops away maybe during the meeting, and who knows, go out the door and it's back. Like, but and even after awakening, you can feel there's a kind of, sometimes you can really sink into it in any sort of situation where there's no agenda. And those kind of talks, there is no agenda. There's nothing being asked of you. You might ask a question, you might just sit there, but very often it's just people can just really sink into this sometimes, but maybe not. You might be sitting there in a really bad mood and really pissed off that you can't get it, which is common as well. So
is that a known thing then, that like people in the room sort of have the self drop away while they're in the room?
Well, it seems to be. I mean, there's a lot of people comment on that. There's a lot. Yeah, I mean, I've heard a lot of that, and yeah, so I think that's part of the attraction, isn't it? Well, really, the attraction is to sit there and the self to fall away and never come back. But yeah, because people come after awakening too, don't they? It's just more, I suppose, the community, but also just to sit, like it's an okay place to be, and so without some bullshit, without anything being asked of you, and there's not a lot of that, is there?
No. How do you communicate with people, like, the ones who are like the people who, you watch the news, for example, and you've got a war going on and the economy's wrecked and whatever else is going on, and you talk about unconditional love and boundlessness and everything, and people may say and respond by saying, oh, but look at the war over in Russia and whatever else is going on. How do you sort of reconcile those two things? Is it simply that the state of that is unconditional love taking place?
Well, there's just a radical acceptance that's what's taking place. But I mean, the character will maybe feel really strongly about that. I mean, you might get someone who's very politically orientated, and that didn't drop away in awakening, and maybe they're actually engaged in stuff. And there's not a political character here, so so it's not like, it doesn't mean to say that you don't give a shit about that. You might or you might not. It depends how you are. Like there is, in a lot of cases, like a kind of more not wanting to change the world, and there is that beautiful thing about, like, when you change, and just being peaceful in yourself. Of course, that's got a knock-on effect in your immediate circle, and you're not causing harm by having some ideology that I can fix it or I know how it should be. Like, yeah. But yeah, it's the political is just, yeah, it's not something. Yeah, I just it's just not my thing. It never was. No.
Yeah, I understand that. I mean, when I've been down the pub, I say to people, like, there's nothing to change here. Everything's playing out perfectly fine. That sort of gets a response of, frowns and how can you say such a thing? And I'm saying, well, it's sort of looking at it from a more holistic point of view, I suppose. Then you're just seeing things more, not better than, just more like aware. I don't want to get in the thing that I am better or worse or whatever is going on, but I tend to see myself as well. I fall into certain things. I'm thinking, why is that happening here? It's ridiculous. And then catch myself and paradoxically think, like, well, no, that's just playing out perfectly fine. But then the mind, it's like neurotic sometimes, and then the mind will just go, oh no, it's perfectly fine. Oh no, that needs changing. Oh, it's perfect. Oh no, that needs changing. And it's like a battle.
Right. Okay. Well, I don't know. There's a lot of shit stuff. I don't know. It depends what you're into, and there's both at the same time. There can be. There's not a set way of seeing this. And to be honest, if you're in the middle of a fucking war and you're like in a really horrific situation, I wouldn't speak for like how anybody would be awake or not awake. It's just going to be fucking horrific. It may not be, depending on how you deal with that. Some people would dissociate. So I don't know. I've never been in like really, really, the mind can go to some dark places. So I don't know. It doesn't it doesn't create indifference, not here. well, maybe for the abstract stuff, I think I'm more like concerned, like maybe a friend or more stuff more close to home for me, like would be more important maybe, you know. So I don't know, we're all different, and more in the moment as well. So it matters when it matters, and then it doesn't when it doesn't. So it's not like stuck with something, you know. When I'm talking about something, I could be pissed off about it, but the minute I stop talking about it, it tends to just, it's gone, like it's just gone. Which is great. I like that. Very nice.
Yeah. Do you like set yourself goals and that sort of thing?
Do I? Well, I set intentions sometimes. Like I have done that sometimes. Yeah, sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know why I even asked that question, but it's something that I look at some of the people who talk about this, and I just think they'd never set anything like that. They don't sort of live in that world of trying to change the world or becoming a different way to what they are or what the world is as it is right now.
Well, yeah, I mean, if I'm doing something like writing something, intending to, it's held as an intention, but I mean, it's not, like, okay, so it's happening. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it. They're not like mutually exclusive so yeah, maybe I'll put aside a bit of time for something and see if a habit forms, Okay, you can't make something happen, but yeah, that's bullshit. I mean, you can set goals if you want. Okay, I tend less to do that. I'm much more spontaneous. I tend not to plan as much as I did, just because I like it that way. And, and I don't know how I'm going to feel, like, so there's more flow where it's not a pain in the ass, because obviously you're dealing with other people when it comes to making arrangements and stuff like that. But yeah, I'm much more, take it as comes. And and goals tend to involve projects that, like writing or something, it's something that I enjoy every moment of doing that anyway. So it's not like, your mind isn't just set on the goal. That is much more the process as well. And, rather than, I don't know.
Yeah. Is there anyone that you've been inspired by in this field? Like, when you had an awakening, was there anyone that you sort of resonated with post awakening?
Oh, what, non-duality kind of wise?
Yeah, I suppose, yeah.
Maybe Eckhart Tolle. Nobody likes. Maybe because the no mind stuff, and he mentioned the seeing and the sacred. I hadn't come across many people then, to be honest. And then I went to a few meetings. I don't know, but yeah. I mean, I wasn't really reading anything after, so that was the only person I kind of knew, and it was very, very simple. I hadn't read The Power Now, but just the kind of basic beginning of that, because I had the book, and so it just seemed very simple. Just that piece. I mean, I don't know. I wasn't reading non-duality books, so later on I had my preferences for who's, I don't listen to this stuff but sometimes I tune in, just to see what people are saying. Obviously, it's interesting as well, but so my love of different people has changed all the time. Like, it's just always shifted, and depending on what I'm into, so.
Why do people not like Eckhart Tolle very much? I don't really understand that.
I'm not sure. I suppose because he does a lot of mindfulness stuff, but the awakening is just obvious. It's very deep with him, but I suppose his retreats are kind of mindfulness based, and you're already, if you're drawn to the meeting, the process has already begun. So I guess it's that, like, you're here. I suppose it's like a teaching, isn't it? So it doesn't go with the radical non-duality so much. That's sort of like, it's a process. It's happening. Just increase the space between thoughts, which is kind of impossible, like, unless you're already kind of awake. I can't see that I don't even know what I would have done with that before awakening, because I mean, aside from the fact there wasn't any space between them, like, I think that would, but yeah, I don't know. But aside, it's a teaching, I suppose, but I still, I don't know. Just the way I expressed it, seeing the states of the sacred as well, I thought it very much echoed what had happened here, and before he goes into spiritual practice, relationship with spiritual practice and all this stuff, like, which is, whatever you make of that, and the pain body. And so, yeah, I'm not really into the concepts around that. I never was, but just the story of it, the initial seeing, that was, I don't know.
Okay, Dawn, we've done over an hour. Thank you for your time. Is there anywhere you want to, for the people who listen, where they can go, your website or YouTube?
Yeah, I've got my YouTube channel, and my website, dawngarland.co.uk. And I do meetings in London, monthly meetings, so you can catch me there in the Philadelphia Association. Just look up Meetup. Yeah, that's about it, really.
Cool.
So,
well, thanks for coming on. I've enjoyed talking to you.
No, I enjoyed it as well. Thanks very much. And
okay, chat soon. Bye-bye.
All right, see you. Bye-bye. Bye.